learned two things in the first 20 seconds that warped the ground under me. 1. The city's open data portal, the one I keep stitched together with duct tape and pride, flagged a vendor in our arts grants package with a duplicate tax ID. 2. On the council live stream, my wife stepped to the lectern to thank the same vendor for making her festival possible, and the staffer next to her slid a manila folder toward her like a magician's secret. I didn't know yet if the bigger problem was professional or personal. I knew if I pulled the wrong thread, I could lose my job and my marriage on the same afternoon. I'm Evan, 35, the guy who babysits Denver's dashboards from a 7th floor office that smells like old coffee and optimism. I love clean data like other people love vinyl. 2 summers ago, my wife Sierra started the South Platte Arts Collective with a dozen folding tables and a dream that smelled like acrylic and rain. I believed in it the way you believe in a first bike ride. You run beside it even when your lungs burn. The inciting incident wasn't a dramatic knock. It was an error code. The grant package was supposed to go out to the press by 5. A red badge popped up on my screen as the city clerk whispered, "And now we recognize Sierra Lane into a microphone across town." The flag said the primary event vendor, Summit Staging, matched an EIN on a company called Mile High Civic Partnerships, which didn't stage anything except budgets for a certain council member's office. Duplicate tax IDs are typos until they aren't. On the livestream, Sierra smoothed her note cards, smiled that bright room smile she practiced in our bathroom, and said this year we doubled attendance, brought in 6 local bands, and kept vendors paid on time. She looked like the picture of a person whose goodness could survive fluorescent lights. The staffer standing shoulder to shoulder with her, a man named Caleb who once asked me at a fundraiser if our portal could make things pop more, slid his folder closer like a reminder. My phone buzzed with a second alert. A new vendor had been added to the collective's bank account's ACH list at 11:42 p.m. the night before. 2-factor on the household iPad pinged me because Sierra still used our shared email for business. The vendor was Summit Staging. My stomach did the math and came back with a number shaped like a question mark. I told myself this was coincidence. The city is full of companies with similar names and overlapping paperwork. The portal tantrums when it wants attention? I turned the stream volume down and opened the grant metadata. Each vendor entry has a version history. Summit's record showed a last-minute correction from a city IP I didn't recognize, but the device stamp looked familiar. The same browser and plugin string as my wife's laptop. I stared at the little line of numbers that don't lie and heard Sierra's voice through my tinny speakers, thanking Summit for donating extra truss and lighting when storms threatened to cancel Friday night. My job had clear lines. My marriage did not. The ethical thing would be to step away and let procurement handle it. The human thing would be to text Sierra and ask why a council staffer's shadow was inside my afternoon. I did neither. I watched the rest of the hearing with a blank face, then added a comment to the record that flagged a potential duplication artifact between Summit and Mile High Civic Partnerships, and sent it up 2 levels with the blandest subject line I could write. After work, I walked the long way home past Union Station to burn the nerves out of my legs. That's where I saw them first. Not holding hands, not breaking any laws, just 2 silhouettes in the reflection of a bakery window, close enough to share a joke without words. Sierra tipped her head the way she only does when she's safe. Caleb's shoulders relaxed like a man who believes he belongs in every room he walks into. At home, the festival posters leaned against our dining room wall, waiting for frames we couldn't afford. Our daughter's marker set was spread out like a color chart for decision fatigue. Sierra came in later, hair damp, cheeks bright from wind, smelling like rain and the paper tunnels of City Hall. She kissed my cheek and asked if spaghetti was okay. I asked how the hearing went. She said they approved 6 new microgrants and made a point of loving us for being scrappy. She smiled with her mouth and not her eyes. I used to think I was the only one who noticed that difference. I wanted to say your vendor's tax ID looks like a suit. I wanted to say the portal spit you back at me like a bad digest. Instead, I asked if she knew a staging company called Summit. Her fingers tightened on the pasta spoon. She said in a voice that wanted to be light that they did a deal on lights. I said, sounded like a pun, and she didn't laugh. We ate in a small noise that wasn't quite silence. Small clues start to feel like humidity. You can convince yourself nothing changed while you sweat through your shirt. A week later, our shared family calendar sprouted 2 new blocks called Site Check, both at 9 p.m., both on school nights. Sierra doesn't drive much after dark unless I'm with her. Her eyes get tired. She has opinions about headlights. I glanced at Find My, not because I wanted to be a cliche, but because the app exists and our lives are full of maps. Her phone dot sat at a building I knew didn't house any stage equipment. It housed a loft with exposed brick owned by a man named Caleb. I told myself property records could be wrong. I told myself the app lags. The next morning, I found a receipt on the console table with a timestamp of 10:41 p.m. from a parking garage 3 blocks south of the loft. Sierra used to stuff receipts into wallets, into purses, into the cracks of the car. This one sat straight in the open like a memory left out to stretch. At work, the procurement analyst Marisol slacked me. Did you see your wife's grant package is on the auditor's hot list? I spun in my chair to look at her over the partition. She raised an eyebrow the way friends do when they know they're writing a sentence in your life. You'll have to finish. I messaged her back in public words about transparency. She dropped a file into my personal email like a sandwich with a note under a napkin. It was a PDF of Summit's W-9, signed by a name I knew belonged to Caleb's brother, and an invoice that listed services in the vaguest possible terms. I called the number on the invoice. A woman answered on the second ring with a voice that had answered for many men. She took a message. No one called back. I didn't confront Sierra then. Instead, I went to the festival's Facebook page and scrolled through tagged photos. There she was, holding a walkie, laughing with a band's drummer, hugging a volunteer in a rain poncho. There, too, in the corner of one shot, was a banner with Summit's logo, just crisp enough to read if you know the font. I scrubbed a clip from someone's live video looking for a man in a navy blazer who shouldn't be back of house. I found him in the reflection off a food truck window, the kind of image that only matters when the story writes itself. By the second escalation, the financial piece had moved like a chess player who takes your rook and smiles without teeth. The collective's bank app dinged on our shared iPad with low balance warnings I hadn't seen before because Sierra always handled the soft parts of money. The ACH list now included not just Summit, but a consultancy called Front Range Horizon. That one I didn't recognize at all. A click showed 2 payouts over 2 weeks to an LLC registered 3 months ago by a man whose home address matched a mailbox store. The memo field said, Community Strategy. The amounts matched the micro-grants the council had voted through. The money had barely touched the collective's account before it slid into vague nouns. At night, I lay next to a woman whose breathing I know like weather, and told myself this was survivable. We could write a correction, return the funds, reset the vendor list, apologize to auditors, start the scrub. We could do that as a team if the other part wasn't true. To learn whether it was, I did the thing I swore I wouldn't. I opened our old shared Gmail, the one we used for playground signups and birthday RSVPs, and the mortgage pre-approval once upon a steadier time. In the drafts were 2 unsent messages, both early AM, both to no one, both with bodies like confessions. One read, I want to build the festival, not the myth of it. The other read, I feel it when you breathe next to me, and that makes me hate the day I chose that you don't live in. The drafts don't show recipients, they show intent. I closed the laptop like it might bite me. The third escalation added another voice. Sierra's father called. He is a retired electrician who thinks the internet is a rumor. He said he saw a photo on the Denver Post of Sierra with a man whose face he didn't like. He said, "Is that your friend from the council office?" I said yes. He said, "I saw his truck near the old depot after midnight last week, and I don't trust any good cause that needs midnight." He is not a city man. He is a wire man. He knows which lines carry current. I couldn't stand the guesswork anymore. I asked Sierra to meet me near City Park, neutral territory where the air smells like a story you haven't ruined yet. We sat on a bench and watched a dog decide to love everyone. I asked if Caleb was in our life for more than politics. She flinched like the question had been thrown. She looked down at her knuckles. She said, "I feel alive when I'm with him in a way I thought was gone in me." She said he believes in the collective, the way I believed in it before I had to file forms. She said it was a mistake, and also not a mistake, and she didn't know how to square that. She said she had kept the collective afloat by being charming and saying yes in rooms, and sometimes the rooms wanted a different kind of yes. I didn't yell. I am not a yeller. I felt something cold instead, something that could build a very clean spreadsheet. I asked her if any grant money had gone to companies that weren't companies. She said she didn't know. The truth sat between us like a pile of receipts. I made my choice then, at the fourth escalation point where people talk about lines. I walked into my supervisor's office and said the grant package under Council Item 12 has an integrity problem, and I need to recuse. He looked relieved that I was telling him before someone else did. He said thank you for being a grown-up. He said procurement, and the auditor would take it from here. He did not ask about my wife. That was a gift. That afternoon, Caleb found me at a coffee shop near the Webb building. He sat without asking and smiled like we were colleagues. He said bureaucracies are built on little messes, and good men are the ones who put lids on them. He said no one wants to tear down a festival that gets kids painting. He said in a tone that tried to be kind that the portal is a PR tool as much as a truth tool, and I should think about which one I want to be today. He said, as if it were an aside, that Sierra had asked him to keep this quiet for our daughter's sake. He said the council member's office respects families, and he would hate for this to become political. He put a hand on my forearm. My skin pulled back like it had touched a stove. I told him two things. One, the portal is a truth tool, even if the truth is inconvenient. Two, if he ever talked about my daughter as leverage again, I would file a report that included every time his name showed up in our audit logs, and Marisol would happily babysit it. He stopped smiling then. He said sometimes the grown-up thing hurts the people we love. I said sometimes it keeps them from drowning in something you're calling rain. The auditor moved fast. When you put a neat stack of dots on their desk, they connect them like it's what their fingers were for. They found the EIN match I found, the brother's signature, the mailbox store, the ACH flows, the banner logo in 3 separate photos, the invoices that said services rendered in font so fancy it must have been expensive. They found text messages on a city phone that should have been on a personal one. They found enough to schedule a hearing. That's when the story left my hands. Sierra came home the night before the hearing and put 3 envelopes on the table. 1 for me, 1 for the auditor, 1 for the council. They each had the same letter inside, in her clean block handwriting, the one she uses when she wants the paper to take her seriously. It said she had created a relationship with Caleb that compromised her judgment and put the collective at risk. It said some vendors were not what they seemed. It said she would resign as director and accept whatever restitution plan kept the collective from dying. It said our daughter did not deserve to learn cynicism from adults who pretended they weren't just people. I read it twice and wanted to ask where the woman who used to label our pantry jars had gone. She sat across from me with her hands folded like a student. I asked her if any money went into her personal account. She said no. I asked her if any went to Caleb. She said yes and no through companies that weren't technically his, which is a way to say yes when you want the sentence to be shorter. She cried without sound. I put my hand on the table between us like a landing strip. The hearing was a gentle public execution. The council member kept his face still. Caleb sat 3 rows back with a brave man expression. Sierra read her letter into the microphone, while activists and artists and parents shifted in their seats. When she said the phrase, "compromised my judgment," a woman behind me whispered, "Jesus." Marisol sat in the corner with a notebook and the kind of smile she reserves for when the system works 1 time out of 10. The auditor recommended clawbacks and a referral to ethics. The council voted to suspend the collective's grants and allow it to reorganize under a new director. Sierra left the room without looking at anyone. Caleb looked at me as if I had taken something from him. In his version, maybe I had. Fallout isn't cinematic. It's the slow rearranging of a life you recognize into a life you can afford. The bank account got thin, then thinner. The city clawed back what it could. The collective's board begged donors. A news story ran with a headline that made Sierra look like a symbol of a larger rot. People need symbols when their budgets shrink. Our daughter started asking why the art room at school had fewer brushes and more rules. We moved from our place near the park to a duplex closer to my office because walking helps when the math doesn't. Sierra took a job at a warehouse where no one knew her in a blazer. She came home with calluses and a quiet that I didn't know how to hold. We split weeks without lawyers because we didn't want to spend money on anyone else who could pronounce Latin. She stopped seeing Caleb because he became a name in a complaint and the heat wasn't flattering anymore. He transferred to another office with a press release about new challenges. Good men wrote comments under it about public service. Months later, in a room with no windows, Sierra signed a restitution agreement and an ethics settlement that said she wouldn't work with city dollars for 3 years. It could have been worse. It could always be worse. I kept my job because I told the truth early and often, and stayed in my lane when it mattered. People in hallways looked at me with a mix of pity and respect that I will never get used to. Here is what stayed. Our daughter, 10 now, plays violin in a way that sounds like a question she's teaching the bow to ask. The South Platte Arts Collective found a new director, an older woman who runs it like a church bake sale and a ship. They paint walls again. The portal pings me at 3 a.m. Sometimes, and I answer because I like being the man who knows which column needs trimming. In a shoebox under my bed is a stack of printouts I never shared with anyone who didn't need to see them. The W-9 with the wrong signature, the ACH screenshot, the Facebook banner, the parking receipt. They're not trophies, they're a curriculum. I open the box when I start pretending data is cold and people are simple. If there's a moral, it's this one I hate and love at the same time. A beautiful picture costs more than you think. When the budget is a public one, the interest compounds in headlines. When the budget is a marriage, the payments come in silence and side glances in hours where the room holds 2 breathing people who can't find the paragraph that used to guide them. We are still here. We talk in small sentences that sometimes grow into real ones. We don't lie to each other about the weather. Would you have blown the whistle knowing it would explode your house, or tried to patch around it and hope no one noticed until you could fix the root? And what costs you more over time, the humiliation of a public hearing or the private gnaw of knowing you faked the numbers and called it love? Like, comment, and subscribe if you want more first-person stories where screenshots matter, money has a voice, and the ending chooses honesty over spectacle.